All right. Hey, everybody. This is a great start to the show. We're all on screen already. We're all ready to start talking here. Welcome to Agentic SaaS Talks. As you guys know, Michael Cooper usually is our host. I'll be filling in today. I'm Bill Tarr. I work for AWS. I'm a partner solutions architect. Work with Salesforce and some of our other large partners. And I have a history with the SaaS Factory, where we spent a lot of time talking about SaaS Anywhere. Spent a lot of time working with Omnistrate because they're one of the best providers of SaaS Anywhere out there. So we've got a really cool show today. You can see we actually have Alok, who's nice enough to take some time away from his new family. That I still want to hear all about Alok. I'm not gonna let you off the hook. But we have two of the founders of Omnistrate here. We've got Ermin, another solutions architect that you guys have seen on the show many times. And I also want to introduce Paul. Paul, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're coming from, because I think you're going to be the key to our journey today and where we're going.
Okay, yeah, my name's Paul. I'm an engineer at Zap, and we have integrated with Omnistrate maybe like 6 months ago, and it has been quite a journey deploying into customers' clouds. It is a very interesting problem to have, and very, you gotta find a lot of unique approaches to every customer as well. So yeah.
So before we go into the SaaS Anywhere stuff, I mean, I've been looking into Zap a little bit. I didn't know a ton about you guys, but I really like the space that you're in. I've been thinking a lot about the memory of agents. Like I'm over here using Claude and Kiro and Agentforce vibes and all these different tools, and I'm recreating my entire identity in all of these tools every time I use them. And I've been looking for a tool kind of like what I think you guys are talking about. So tell me a little bit about this memory context that you guys are building and how it works.
Yeah, so Zap is a context engineering platform, and we are also, I apologize, I'm an engineer, so I might not be able to like
Not the
deliver a
marketing side.
super crisp
Yeah.
marketing pitch here, but basically we are ingesting data from a lot of different sources, and we are building a meaningful knowledge graph out of those. This could be like, knowledge graphs for users. These could be knowledge graphs for groups of users, and then we offer a very good recall on these graphs. And the idea is that whenever in your AI application you need to get some good context into the next prompt that you'll give to the agent, you'll call Zap and get some of that context so that the answer is relevant. Yeah.
Nice. And obviously, I mean, as soon as we start thinking about what that means, it means you're going to have to be in a lot of different places. You're going to have to be where customers have their data. You're going to have to be in the cloud. You're going to have multiple clouds probably at some point. I guess I could see how that leads us to this part of the journey, right? And so maybe tell me a little bit about how you started to think about SaaS Anywhere when it got on your radar, and how that led you to Omnistrate, maybe.
I mean, what led us to Omnistrate was the challenge of BYOC deploying into customers' clouds, and also, I guess, this process not being a mess. So, because sometimes it's quite hard. So we needed a system where we could basically scale with, so that we wouldn't necessarily have to support like Snowflake customers with, but could come kind of like, I guess, somehow generalize the whole thing and build a system out of delivering updates in an expected manner, so that we kind of like are able to maintain our, I guess, level of quality, deliver patches efficiently as well. Yeah, and obviously also, like, if you think about the knowledge graphs, the enterprises will want it to be in their cloud, right? Because this is all really sensitive data. So this is, I guess, a challenge we would have faced eventually, like inevitably. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we worked with a lot of SaaS companies over the years, and it's great that you were so far ahead of the curve, even realizing you were going to have that problem before you had that problem, because usually we meet those companies when they're having those problems, not before they have those problems. So let me open up the floor a little bit. Kamal, Alok, do you want to talk? Anyone else want to talk about like this sort of, bring your own cloud anywhere? I think that there's a 10 commandments out there now. Since I went on vacation, they came down and they brought a couple tablets, and now there's commandments about bring your own cloud anywhere. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about those, where we're coming from and how that fits in with this journey that Zep is talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I can quickly chime in. Yeah, I think what we started, obviously we've been working with many customers and the different deployment challenges, especially as Paul mentioned with customers' environments, right? And so what we wanted to put out is effectively almost like a guide, if you will, like a guidebook, if you will, and not just from an ISV's perspective like ZEP, right, but also from the end customer who ZEP is trying to serve to, and they want to see what they're actually putting in their VPC or their cloud, right? What is it exactly that's running there? They want to see as much transparency as possible. They want to get all of the controls in place so that obviously at any point in time they can revoke, grant, it's completely there under control, right? Because they're at the end of the day answerable to their own stakeholders. They have their own compliances that they have to meet, and so we wanted to consolidate all of these different interaction points that we've had over the past couple of years, and we put that into what we effectively call, as you said, the 10 commandments, right? The 10 principles that we think govern and should satisfy a lot of these requirements, especially for highly regulated customers. And yeah, I can go over it, but obviously in detail in a couple minutes. But yeah, that was the inspiration for it, if you will.
Nice. And I was just glancing at it, and if anyone hasn't found it yet, we'll drop the link into the chat, or if you're not watching this live, BYOC Anywhere.org, pretty easy to find. If you can't type that out, then I don't know, ask your LLM, it'll tell you where it is. And I'm looking at the different sections, and I'd already heard Paul talking about delivery and operations. I think there's a lot of pieces: this identity and privilege, connectivity, accountability and exit, and then data sovereignty. Which, I mean, if you're building a knowledge graph, you better be thinking about data sovereignty and where that data is sitting, because if you don't, your customers are going to come and ask you for it, right? Ermin, let me pull you into this conversation too, because data sovereignty makes me think of EMEA. Rightly or wrongly, I feel like that's what always drags us into that conversation. Tell me a little bit about your experience with the sort of BYOC in Europe, especially, and how those customers that you're working with are reacting to that when they have to do bring your own cloud or expose their data to SaaS providers.
Mm-hmm. So I was actually working a lot with SaaS companies, usually startups, right? Building solutions in the cloud, and sooner or later they actually face the issue where the customer says, we need actually, my data is not leaving my account, right? Or my data, your process needs to run in the cloud. So we team basically that you were at, Bill, so SaaS Factory came up with a concept called SaaS Anywhere. It's basically BYOC, right? So how to meet the customer where they are. So, and according to that concept, you had a different layers, right? So we all know that SaaS consists out of a control plane and out of your data plane or application plane, depends how you call it. And we always look at that a little bit as a technical problem, how to solve it, right? So how to do the networking, how to meet the customer, how to reach the customer's data and things like that. Recently I started, because it's a trust issue, and I think, Alok, you're actually mentioning that in your article. It's a trust issue and you need to have zero trust. Recently what I also discovered is that it's actually this zero trust comes from both sides, right? So it was always for me, we had a situation where customer doesn't trust a startup or SaaS provider to handle their data, and they want their data into their account. And this is somehow easier to solve, because you have the list of 10 commandments, Alok, to say, okay, this is actually how to handle identity, this is how to access the data. My recommendation was always, don't deploy your full data plane, application plane, if you don't have to, right? Maybe think about deploying part of it. But recently I also discovered that it's a trust issue also from the SaaS provider side, where SaaS provider who deployed application and the database at the customer account, they want to protect their IP. And this is actually also quite a big topic. So we have this trust issue from both sides. So it's not only about the data sovereignty and where the data is stored. I think in Europe we have that also at AWS, quite good regulated with
yeah,
bunch of different regions on within European Union, but also European Sovereign Cloud, which is a completely different entity. So that from that perspective, it's easier to handle that. It's a technical topic, but what is very hard to handle is actually that trust issue, right? Trusting someone with your data and vice versa, right? So me as a SaaS provider trusting my customer that they will not steal my IP. Not sure if you're covering that in your 10 commandments, right?
So actually,
it's number one.
That's exactly right. I mean, the reason that's a great point, Ermin, because the reason why we're seeing this shift also, right, from like if you think about bring your own cloud, I mean, it did exist in the past. It was just that you would just give someone your installer, right, and you say you figure it out, right. So obviously there are many challenges that come with it, but to your point, there's a lot of restrictions that as an ISV you had to place, because now that you throw it across the pond, you have no idea what they'll do with it, right? Exactly. And so that's where the whole remote management, being able to actually provide a fully managed SaaS experience, but sitting in the customer's account, where they can actually put these controls from the ISV's perspective also, including things like licensing, understanding how they're actually using it. All of that matters significantly. And that's why that was the core reason why we even brought this up. So, but yeah, great point.
Love it. Paul, let me go back to you really quick. I know you're mostly like a back-end engineer, and like me, you'd rather be in the code, but occasionally we have to talk to customers too. Like they make us do it. When we talk to customers about their data and how you're deploying and how you're keeping their data safe, I mean, when I think about a knowledge graph, I think about all of the stuff I'm putting into these different LLMs I'm using and the tools. I'd love that to be shared across those tools, but I don't want anyone else seeing it. If it's a secret business, or, if I'm starting a startup, I don't want my IP to leak. If I'm at AWS, I don't want my customers' data to leak. Very concerned about that data and how it's handled. So I'm kind of curious, when you think about this and what you're developing, how do you think about the customer's journey of using Zep and how that data is protected for them?
I think there's like multiple layers to it. Are we talking about SaaS cloud product, or whenever we're deploying to the customer's cloud as well?
I mean, that's even better right there. The fact that you have multiple ways to do this speaks to the journey for the customer. Tell me a little bit about those different journeys. Like, why do your customers pick one or the other? What are those journeys like?
Yeah, I think that it really depends on the customer and where they are at, and maybe their, I suppose, paranoia level, or what they are prepared to kind of set up to protect their data. I think that there's a lot of things that one can do with just a cloud deployment, so not deploying anything within the customer's VPC, for instance, which at Zep we offer customer managed encryption keys, where basically we're going to be using your keys to encrypt the data that is stored in Zep, so we cannot actually see it at all, even if we wanted to. So I feel like that's a very good kind of middle ground solution for a lot of the customers that don't want to take on the ownership of the infra in their cloud, and it's quite easy to get started with. But also, once we kind of deploy in the actual customer's clouds, it becomes a question of who can access the data. We have a lot of conversations about ingress and egress, data traveling over the open internet, which is a big no-no. So I feel like the customers that are, BYOC customers, they want the air-gapped option, more or less, for the deployment, where they will have their own InfoSec team set up everything that they need to be able to access that data, and otherwise it's supposed to be impenetrable.
Nice. Yeah.
Does that answer your question, or?
It does. I mean, just the range of what you're already talking about here, the fact that there's different customers, and those customers will be the ones to tell you how you're going to handle their data. This is actually a journey we've been through with many SaaS providers. People often come in with sort of a monolithic view of their customer base. Oh, hey, we got our first customer. This is how they want to use our software. And they develop the software to model around that. But often, if you're in the real world of dealing with this, particularly AI, and particularly the data that drives AI, the sensitivity of that data varies greatly, and the individual customer's willingness or ability to let you access that data requires a lot of flexibility, and building out not just one solution, which is, again, where I think the Omnistrates of the world and the bring your own cloud really are important, because recreating that wheel of, okay, the customer wants me to put it in their account. How do I manage updates when it lives in the customer account? Oh, it lives in my account, but I also have to manage that and think about whether that's, bring your own key, whether I'm providing the key, or there are different deployment types. What does that look like, and how do I manage the updates and keep all of those different things up to date, even in like a white label situation where a customer like, I don't even want to have people in my company know that we're using your software. We're just going to use your software in the back end. It's invisible to everybody else, but that's an IT problem. So like, there's all sorts of different ways to think about this deployment pattern. So Paul, it's interesting to hear like that your first thought was like, which one do you mean? We've got these different patterns, right?
I guess it really depends on the profile of the company, because it's actually like quite interesting how diverse the companies can be, because like sometimes it's a big enterprise and they like straight up want just BYOC immediately. It's like a bit of a non-starter to have them on the cloud platform. Some companies are like they have a healthcare profile and they'll need HIPAA, but they still want to be using a cloud product because they're not big enough to actually do a like a full on-prem or BYOC deployment. So yeah, I think it's very important to kind of cater to these needs and provide an option for everybody in a sense that is like an ICP.
Nice. Let me kick it to Omnistrate a little bit here too, because I'm curious to what extent, so what Paul's describing to me reflects a lot of the real world experience, but I'm guessing there's a variety even to the type of customers that you guys work with. Are there some that are like this and say, hey, we have to have the multiple ones? Are there some that are pretty monolithic and like, hey, this is how we deploy software? And how do those different, bring your own cloud providers? Like, I know of an enterprise search software out there where it's in your own cloud. That's it. We don't have a hosted SaaS version because we don't want to think about your data and have to protect your data. That's the only way we're going to do it. But there's different deployment patterns. How do you guys think of those, and how do you support those?
Yeah, I wish I can share a link here. I don't know.
We have a chat here somewhere, I think.
No, it's a private chat. I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think it helps. But anyways, we to your point, we recently wrote a blog on that as well. And the point is, there are four main within the BYOC itself. Like we talk about in the SaaS world, we have the pool and silos and the full multi-tenant shared versions, right? Similarly, on the BYOC side, we see four variants essentially. And it goes from how much control and flexibility depending upon like what ISVs are looking for, right? So the one is before I go over the four, it's good to understand like what are the different layers and where the customers are asking more control or less control. And so the four layers are the basic networking, right? The second one is the infrastructure on top, which is like Kubernetes, compute, storage, and all the other interactions with other PaaS SaaS services. The other layer is the application itself, right? And that's, if you think of this as a three-layered stack, then you basically you can imagine one world where customers. When I'm talking about customers, I'm referring to ISV's customers here. So Zep's customers, for example, where so let's talk in case of Zep. So customers can come to Zep and say, hey, look, here's my cloud account. Here's my 9-digit or 12-digit AWS account ID, just deploy it, set up everything, network, the infrastructure, the Zap AI, the whole deployment, and operate it like end to end, right? The second model is what happens is as you go more towards, more customers who are looking for more control from Zep's point of view, they may say, hey, look, I'm going to set up the networking. Don't worry about it. Like, I want to control the firewall rules. I want to control the VPC, how it is set up. I'm going to do it manually, but I'm going to give you that private VPC with rules already configured, set up everything on top. And then you go further down the road where some customers are like, no, we also want to standardize. We have our own platform team, and we standardize how we operate Kubernetes, for example. And we do not want somebody setting up the Kubernetes in a way different from, because it creates more operational pain for us. And we would like to actually manage all the Kubernetes in-house ourselves. There are security reasons, there are standardization reasons, X, Y, Z. And so there the customers may come to Zap and say, hey, look, I'm owning everything until Kubernetes layer. So all the infrastructure, don't bother, just manage the layers upwards. And then you have the complete, federal L5, L6, L7, air-gapped, scenarios, bankings, and others where no access, like no amount of controls, nothing will, help. We just need a complete air gap. Like you just give us a one-click installer. I'm just going to install that, right? And if you want to bundle the management layer, like your control plane as well, so you can ship on the other side, sure, I'll take it. So it's more like a control center being shipped, or as Alok calls it, self-guided installs. So if you want to move that along with it, move it along with it, right? So those are the four spectrums that we typically see, like how this spectrum. Now, not every ISVs encounter may all of them. Some may encounter some a couple of them or more than that. So that really depends upon the customer segments that they are into.
Makes a lot of sense.
Can I just jump in on this one? So, Bill.
Yeah.
Especially the last one, right? So I really kind of struggle, calling that SaaS, right? And I don't want to go into philosophical discussion, but what you're actually doing, you're shipping your full product, including your product control plane, to a customer. So potentially you cannot control it, you cannot update it. You will, as an ISV, end up with 10 different versions of your software for 10 customers, and this actually definitely speaks against SaaS. And I know that sometimes you need to do that, especially if you're actually facing large business opportunity and you don't want to lose the potential deal. But I wouldn't then go and call that a SaaS product anymore.
Well, depends upon the implementation. Okay. Let me humor you. So that's interesting. You bring up an interesting point, because when we talk about air gap, right? So okay, you're packaging some installer, right? So you have certain application, and let's say you have some management layer. You package everything together, and now Zap can basically imagine, like Zap can say, look, for all of my completely highly regulated customers, take this installer, and these guys, like customers, you can just run it. But from Zap's point of view, still, it's a single control plane, still managing who are the customers, what subscriptions, what deployment, what version of the installs they are running. It is still tracked from Zap's point of view. It's all there. Yes, there is no real-time connectivity. So there is no real-time monitoring. So if things go wrong, yes, you're right. It has to be off-the-band channel for Zap's customers to notify Zap. I agree with that part. But from the control plane, if you look at it from the perspective of the fleet, from the perspective of management of customers, from the perspective of managing the application versions, who is using what version, how the upgrade needs to roll out. So for example, you can release a new version, and Zap can basically say, look, I'm going to make this version available to a subset of my customers, and only those customers will be notified, and they can go and take the newer upgrade installer and just run that. And again, I agree, it's not a full SaaS experience where upgrade happened behind automatically, magically, but it's still far better than following a manual of 500 instructions, because they are just taking an upgrade installer, one-click installer, and running it, copying it to the bastion and just running it. The installer or the upgrader is supposed to take care of everything. It's like the definition here is not like traditional, hey, follow this checklist. The definition of here of upgrader is run the pre-checks. Make sure you run the upgrade process. It has to be entirely automated. Run the post-check. Do not leave things in between where you left a mess now on the customer side, right? And if things do go wrong, like or anything went wrong, print a clear error message that allows your customers to come back to you and get a premium support or whatever, better support, rather than giving you some things that they don't know what to provide you, what error message to say, right? So my point is that upgrader and installer has to do the heavy uplifting, and the control plane aspect or some of the responsibility of the offline control plane still stays from the Zap's point of view, right? And so Zap will still have that view. So my point is, yes, you're right, it's 100% not SaaS, but there is a directionally or in spirit, you are operating still from that perspective.
Yeah. I have impression that we're a little bit, back into beginning of 2000s with what you describe, I mean, because I worked like that before, right? So this is actually, but it's becoming reality. I'm not saying it's wrong, right? It's becoming reality, especially with agentic workload and
Yes.
agent and SaaS. This by default is actually bring your own cloud solution, right? So SaaS Anywhere solution where this, I don't think that we will work around it. We just need to find and define solutions, and I think this is what you in Omnistrate trying to do with the 10 commandments.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, and I mean, we used to call these control planes. I know control plane has sort of gotten folded into a lot of other terms, but like this idea that it itself, Omnistrate itself is a SaaS. You're a SaaS provider, but you're a SaaS provider of SaaS providers. So like there's this inception story that starts to happen. Is like, all right, where does this actually end? Because if I'm a SaaS provider with a control plane, creating a control plane that lets you control plane, like where do we end out on this journey? Because it is theoretically possible. People can take your product, build other products on it, and use that to build other products on those.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating, actually. It's a cool story. I think anyone who's thinking about a SaaS product should be, and Paul, again, credit to you guys thinking about this pretty early on your journey, but I think maybe AI is bringing this back into focus for people because those conversations are happening earlier. Instead of like traditional SaaS where you'd be like, hey, I'm Salesforce or I'm Adobe, and eventually customer 187 says, you know what, you've got to put that in our accounts, and you're like, no, I don't. I'm Salesforce or I'm Workday. Like, I don't have to do what you tell me. But even those companies have to make hard decisions, right? I've worked with some extremely large SaaS providers, and eventually there's a customer that's big enough that you don't want to let them go. And they come to you and say, this is how our IT says you have to deploy software. This is what our SecOps says, period. I don't care what, we love your software. We want to use your software, but this is the gate. This is the gate. You have to get through this gate for us to use your software. I think AI has just moved that gate so far in the beginning. So many companies are just, you can't let our data exfiltrate our accounts.
100% right? It's the inherent nature of the AI app, right? Like a little bit of that, which is, and to be honest, like we hear all sorts of supply chain attacks and other risks associated with it. So people are really worried.
Yeah.
People are worried about, the multi-tenancy and what level of controls being put in, and because we don't know yet the power, and still people are, every day we are evolving so fast, people are worried about it. And what they're saying is, look, let me go to the brute force mechanism. So brute force mechanism, put it in my account, I put it in lockdown VPC. But at the least, even if I'm getting in the vendor's account, please give me a silo version or single tenant SaaS version, right? What we call.
Yeah.
So completely isolate me. Like I don't want, application level multi-tenancy, because I don't trust the application controls anymore.
Yeah. And I think there's some fairness to that, right? Even in an organization, Kamal, you worked at Amazon, Alok, you worked at Amazon. Sorry, Paul, is that Amazon club around you, I'm surrounded. But there are departments in Amazon that I can't even talk to. Like I cannot know their data. I can't know what they're working on. I can't know anything about what they're doing. They're top secret, right? Some of them for just, IP reasons, some of them for government reasons, some of them for whatever, specific reasons. Even in an organization, you need some very strict firewalls, right? So even if you think about, and we used to talk a little bit about internal SaaS. I never really caught on as a topic because I think it's kind of hard to frame up, but really departments can be their own companies in a lot of ways too. So I don't think it's crazy to think like if I was thinking about selling Zap, marketing Zap, even telling the company, your customers, hey, you should be treating your individual department's data as very sensitive, right? You wouldn't want your IT department talking to your HR department, having access to their data in like the most simplistic of terms. And some things are much, much worse than that even, right? Some of the sensitivity is much worse. So Paul, I'm kind of curious, have you run into this concept where your customers are telling us like, hey, our individual departments even need to have their own knowledge graphs, and those shouldn't be overlapping, and we need to think about how our organization breaks down by departments?
That's kind of like how Zap operates by default, in the sense, we haven't done like separate BYOC deployments into like dedicated departments of a company. That's I think that's like on a whole another level, but our data is fully not only tenant isolated, but like every tenant within the tenant is also isolated. So there's no like
Nice.
commingling of like each graph of each customer is its own database, essentially. That's like completely isolated from the other one. So there's no commingling like that. Does that answer your question? Or
it does. It does. Like you've actually by design made
Yeah.
it so that concern is sort of handled regardless of who the tenant is. The tenants within the tenants within the tenants, wherever you get down to that level, is actually like it's its own database. And I mean, I was reading up a little bit about Graphiti and about how it is the tool that you guys have built sort of naturally like that, where it really has its own tenancy and really breaks down.
I wouldn't say necessarily naturally, because Graphiti supports like various graph database providers as the database, and it's kind of like it's our open source graph engine, but Zap is a very big build up on top of Graphiti that exposes some of the features that the enterprises would like to see. We actually have our own proprietary graph database, internally labeled König, after like a Hungarian mathematician. But basically, yeah, that's where we can kind of like go crazy and do some of the things that I guess are a little bit too complicated for the open source community necessarily. Like it's a bit of an overkill for you to have your own like enterprise ready graph database running locally. But if you do want to deploy it to enterprises, that's kind of like what you have to do. So the like data isolation, I'm more speaking about the latter here. Yeah.
I like that as a transition though, because I kind of like this concept, and I think Omnistrate's going in a similar direction here, where there are community open source versions of what you do.
Correct.
And if that works for you, great. Go ahead and, if you want to install your own Graphiti, if you want to install the open source version of Omnistrate, great. If that, up to a certain point, that will work for you. And then there are harder problems. And this is where you get into the different models of open source, right? There are things that are behind the gate where they're hard and they're expensive to do, and it isn't something that we're just going to open source. And if you need those, you probably have enough money to spend for. So go pay some money and actually get the tool you need. So let me pivot a little bit and open the floor up about open source and how it fits into this world that we're creating.
Yeah, no, I think actually that's a great point. I also think Zep is a classic example right there, right? Which is you provide value that you don't charge anyone any money for. That's something that people can pick right off the bat, especially from a mindshare perspective, right? I mean, this is the way you need to go. You need to get memory into agents. This is what you need to adopt, right? And then you transition towards enterprises. And I think it's not monetization is not the primary reason. It's primarily because it takes effort, right? Because it takes effort to get you an enterprise grade software and a service. And enterprises themselves have requirements in terms of SLAs, in terms of obviously they don't want to be left managing this whole thing, right? And so that's where the root of obviously open core and everything has been in the past decade or so, right? And that's where it's taken off, if you will think about it. And so that also is coming back to how Omnistrate operates, right? So if you have a simple deployment problem, if it's something that's not something that you can, especially with coding agents available, that you can actually put together using some Terraform, some, let's say, CI/CD pipelines using like GitHub. We already have most of these set up today. That's great. You can code up a bunch of these things and you're good to go, right? I think where it tends to become more complex, as we are discussing, is especially, even if you just take BYOC as an example, is where every customer requirement starts to look different from the other customer. And even within a customer, as we were discussing, right, they want different controls depending on, something as simple as, hey, when are you rolling your updates out? Are you going to manage CVE patches if something gets announced? So there are so many levels of like shared responsibility models that these different customers want, that you need the tooling in place to be able to support that, right? Otherwise, you don't want to build 10 different control planes that do for every customer separately. That just looks... It's bad for your customer, it's bad for you, it just doesn't work all around. And so that's the same model that we've been following, which is we work with our customers, we identify their use cases, we suggest, we are very transparent, we suggest that, look, this is a simple enough use case, you should start out with something basic, And then more often than not, what happens is they do transition into the first customer deployment or enterprise deployment that requires these things, and then they naturally gravitate towards using Omnistrate.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds Machiavellian. I really like the model though. I really love the idea of open source. I think to a point, as developers, and I think all of us are or have been developers in our lives, the ability to get your hands on with something is second to none in terms of experiences of understanding something. I literally am unintelligent about something till I've had my hands on it. Like I can throw a new technology in front of me, I nod. I'm like, yeah, oh, okay, data transfer something. Like, okay, whatever you're talking about. As soon as you get your hands on with it, it becomes concrete. Okay, now I know why this is important. I understand the potential and the pitfalls.
And sorry to interrupt, but Bill, if you want, we can actually do a quick demo of how
it feels. Well, I mean, I will never say no to a demo, especially if you're willing to do one live. And we'll make some offerings to the demo gods here. Break it out.
Yeah, no pressure to people.
No pressure. No pressure. Break it out. Let's see it.
Okay, let's try this. So actually, it's a little bit of a. I don't know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen? All right, there we go. All right, cool. So just for some context, right? So one of the things that we've been working with is, because platform engineering, obviously, this all boils down to platform engineering. It's a complex piece, right? Because as I said, there's both sides of the equation, which is what ISVs have in terms of artifacts and what they have in terms of an architecture that looks different for every ISV, as well as on the customer side, what requirements they have looks different for each. And so this is where LLMs are great, because they translate your high-level requirements into concrete steps, right? And the concrete steps obviously get better when you work on solid abstractions. And that's what Omnistrate provides in terms of like, look, this is a declarative spec. This is what you use to control your entire control plane, what gets generated. And so we took a stab at basically writing up some skills. And so I know some of our customers, have been using this, and in general, just obviously interacting with Omnistrate using this. And so I'll try, obviously, we're going to try something with, do a bring your own account deployment kind of a distribution. So assuming, an open source or basically a Helm chart. And then we'll take that as a simple example of what you might have, and then you want to distribute in your customers again. How do you set up like a self-service portal with this? How do you set up like an internal operational portal with it? And all of that should be live. If it doesn't work, I do have a backup chat transcript that I can walk through. So in any case,
all right,
we can show what works. Cool. So I have, obviously, it's simple Claude code, right? And so I'm going to pick up. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but there is this service called Nextcloud, which it was a pretty popular thing that came out obviously as an open source version of like, your Google Drive / Open Office, a bunch of these things. So imagine your Nextcloud as an ISV, you are open source, you have great motion there, people love your product. But then enterprises say, okay, I actually would love, separating myself away from a bunch of these different and consolidating that into a single product. I love Nextcloud, but I don't want to manage it. So can you deploy on my account, right? And so as Nextcloud, it should be as simple as going to Cloud and basically saying, so there's a bunch of skills, I'll share that with you that you can install, and saying, help me deploy this in my customer's account. And all you need, and here in this particular case, I'm just pasting Artifact Hub. Artifact Hub is basically the location where the Helm chart is located. And so this takes, obviously, it iterates through the skills. It takes a couple minutes and goes back and forth. But then what comes out of it, as you can see, so it picks up the skill. It says, this is a Helm chart, and this is a BYOC deployment. I'm going to try and figure out. So it comes back with questions. So this is kind of our model that we follow, if you will, with our customers, right? Which is collect all the requirements first. Yes, it's BYOC, but as Kamal mentioned, there's multiple different flavors of BYOC. What exactly does that mean? All of that has to be collected up front. So this is what it goes through. And especially if it's connected to your Omnistrate account already with the CLI and everything, it knows what you have already and what's missing. So there's a couple of things it's basically piecing together. And so while it's doing that, obviously I'll open up the floor for any discussion.
Well, first, I see the mythical FDE in here. I feel like FDE, the concept has just taken over the world. Everywhere I turn around, all of a sudden, it's forward deployed engineers. I didn't know we were forward deployed engineers, but I guess we are. One way or another.
It's hilarious because when we were tuning up the skills, it actually the coding agents, or the LLMs rather, actually got the concept of deployments much better when you introduce the dev FDE. So clearly there's something in the
There's something to
they
this.
understand the complex problem. So when you say FDE, so it is a trigger word and it works.
Apparently it's working well. Paul, is this similar to your experience as well in terms of using Omnistrate, or?
Well, I haven't used the skills yet.
Okay.
I think it's all quite new. I have used CLI extensively though.
Yes,
that's correct.
Of course.
No, that's exactly right. So it's the skills are new. It's something that we are obviously picking up based on our experience of how we've interacted with a bunch of customers so far, right? But yeah, that's right. Zep started out a little earlier than that, and so this is something that if someone is trying to onboard it, this would take place.
It is waiting on you. You have to.
All right, I'm going to pick AWS, of course, and then say, hey, and then it's going to say, look, there's an approach to how you do day 0 and day 1. Let's try to get this working in your dev environment first, and then we'll go to production. And you say, sounds good. And then it says, what specific flavor of BYOC are you looking for, right? This is the thing that Kamal mentioned. And so especially, is it a subnet or a VPC that the customer is already providing? Is it everything's obviously locked down? And I can say, look, let's just go with the standard one. Everything starts from scratch. That works. And it's also asking, where do you want to deploy the first one to? So this is almost like saying, let's just take it directly to show you the value, right? So it's say, let's say US West 2. And so it's going to go back. Now, again, as I said, now it's going to assess the requirements in terms of like what the current, what the chart looks like and what needs to be done to generate that specification. Yeah.
And how do you operate this? Do you actually share the skill and the agent with your customers, or what is the idea?
So I can drop a link again to this. So there is basically there's an open source repo for the agent's instructions, and of course we welcome contributions to it. I know there was a place to drop the link. Might as well just.
We can always post it once when we publish the video.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll share that with you. Yeah. That's correct. So basically, there is it's basically standard Claude skills, right? So it's the same format, and so folks can install that. They can connect it to whatever coding agent they want, as I say, and then it comes back and then it generates this. So obviously, I'm using Claude, but yeah, go ahead.
How are you packaging it? Are you using Open Plugin or something else?
So we actually, it's in GitHub. So you can actually use NPX with the skills plugin or the skills command line tool, right? So you can literally say NPX skills add this, and that's it. It should take care of it.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, so right now what it's basically doing, as you can see, right, I mean, obviously I talked through what it's thinking, but basically what it's doing is it said, it took down the chart, it looked at the Helm chart, because that's the interface point for what the ISV wants to deploy, right? And then it is trying to extract as much information as possible from all of the different artifacts that are trying to be deployed. Then it looks at the Omnistrate specification, which is specifically the declarative spec that I mentioned. There's a JSON schema for it. And then it tries to map the two. And then it says, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm going to create a deployment wrapper, and there's like per service properties that I need to break it down into. And then it goes and then tries to set up all of that in the specification.
Very cool. Behind the scenes, what kind of ISC is it using? Is it CDK? Is it just CloudFormation prints its own?
Yeah, so in this particular case, because Omnistrate is trying to manage the infra layer, because that's the option we chose, right? So what it's actually doing is, so we actually have our own infrastructure management layer, which explicitly is because it's trying to be asset compliant. We want to actually bring the database principles into infrastructure management so that you can do rollbacks, you can do roll forwards, you can do things like, for example, isolation from different parallel workflows. So there's a bunch of things that we put in place. So that's what it's starting with. And then the actual deployment on top of it, because this is a simple, just deploy this Helm chart, again, it just leverages Omnistrate and Helm to take care of the rest of the process there. Now, if a customer wants to bring in their own Terraform or their own CloudFormation, that's fine. That can be embedded as part of like the spec. So what we then do is we just use that environment and then deploy and then bring up, or rather run that Terraform, for example, in that customer's environment and then set things up. So we have obviously the tooling and everything that's necessary to debug if necessary something goes wrong. But by default, it's just using our infrastructure management layer.
I mean, I think that's kind of interesting for anyone who's used CloudFormation and everything else and run into like dead ends where I can't get back, I can't go forward, I'm stuck with this CloudFormation template. It's interesting, and it's kind of similar.
Rollback failed.
Yeah, exactly right. Like Paul, you guys do something very similar with the temporal awareness of the graph and like, being able to go forward and backward in time. I feel like that's gotten so much more prevalent in software. Like temporal out there for like workflows, you guys, the way you think about infrastructure, Paul, the way you guys think about knowledge graphs. I think people miss like the time series in terms of thinking about how to manage things, but I think all you guys have both really given some good solid thought into these products and how they work over time. So thumbs up from me.
Yes, I think quite distinct, all of the things, but very interesting observation though. Yeah.
Cool. I have the service set up right now. So actually,
Wow.
Let me just go back. So yeah, that's basically it. You would just get onboarded, right? So I'm going to switch my screen share to...
So just a quick question, Alok. It says, have you reviewed your service plan? Did we enter to that?
No, I'm actually not proceeding. So it's like, think of it as like a pit stop. It stops there saying, hey, here is the portal. It's ready. Now, do you want to make any changes or do you want to actually deploy it?
Okay. It's a continuous thing. Okay, got it.
Correct. And so here, this is basically the UI that is the Omnistrate portal, right? So as you can see,
Look at
Nextcloud, it actually created like a plan automatically that says bring your own account plan, and this is actually going to be deployed to the customer's environment. And then if you click through, this is the spec that it generates. Very simple, obviously, we're just getting started, right? And so you can go in and then say, okay, this is a simple chart. This is just Nextcloud. There is, as I said, so some amount of customization that it added in terms of like load balances and everything that Omnistrate sets up for it. And then some default instance types that it chose. But from its perspective, okay, this is good to get started. Basically, let's break it up into minor steps, right? Now, I can go back, and as I said to the other thing right there, I'll show you another part, which is, this is the, think of this as basically the build side of thing, where you're actually iterating on the actual service. Then this is the SaaS offer, right? This is where the self-service offer resides for your customers. So this is the view that your customers get in terms of like a portal that they, give me 1 second, sorry. Yeah, a portal that they can actually open to do the deployments and try a bunch of these things. So let me switch to that. Perfect. So this portal, by the way, is open source, so you can completely white label this, out of the box, or you can take it, fork it, change the look and feel, especially if you want to customize the user experience about how you want your customers to do deployments. And so there's obviously a bunch of other services that are co-located here, but I'm going to go to the Nextcloud one. Give me 1 second. Right here. So the customer can say subscribe. And then all they have to do is just onboard their account, which is right here. That's another portal right there that they can, page that they can actually go to. Give me 1 second. Yeah, right here. And they create the cloud account, they provide the account information. They can even say enforce private connectivity. And then going back here, once it's set up, they just choose the region where they want to deploy. And then by default, obviously, because we're iterating on this Nextcloud product, it's going to deploy with default configuration and everything, so nothing else is needed from the customer's perspective. So they could just enforce private networking, and that's it. They're good to go. So it should then take care of that's the full SaaS experience now, if you think about it, right? Because now Nextcloud is going to come up in the customer's environment. It'll come up with everything from scratch. It sets up the entire networking. It sets up the compute necessary. It sets up the storage necessary. It'll even set up DNS and TLS certificates, all of that. That's what the spec already is doing. And so that is, obviously we're trying to get through it as quickly as possible, but that's in a nutshell how easy it is to get started. And you can iterate, of course.
That is really awesome. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Really. Alok, one question. So how generic that is, right? Because you just passed the link of the GitHub solution, right? And went and it did everything. So in theory, I could also use it for any other product. Is that
Absolutely
really like that? Yeah, cool.
It's exactly like that. So in fact, I actually have another example that I was just playing with just to see. Obviously, LLMs they've gotten so good, and the coding agents have gotten so good, right? But I was trying to set up temporal, right? And I was just saying, hey, imagine you're temporal, and then I actually need to put things out, right? With temporal, obviously, it's a little bit more complex because it's obviously temporal, but it's like a backing store, and then there is Cassandra. There's a bunch of things like that. So I just pasted links and that said, hey, this is the temporal Helm chart. This is the CLDB or Kubernetes operator. This is a reference to Postgres CNPG operator. figure it out. I literally just said, figure it out. And then it came back with a spec saying, okay, Omnistrate knows how to deploy Kubernetes operators. I'll interact with that. I know how to deploy Helm shards. I'll interact with that. And then it went back and forth, effectively. It kind of went, browsed the website, looked at the specification, because it's Kubernetes, it talks Kubernetes, then came back and then generated the spec and said, this is how you can deploy the portal with all of those artifacts. So it's as straightforward as that. You just basically...
I'm going to jump in because I know we've been holding Paul a little bit too long here. We're at the top of the hour. Paul, thank you so much. This is really awesome. I definitely want to learn more about Zep. We'll talk offline a little bit more. I'm going to get into what you guys are doing because it feels like this is a really important space right now. And I'm really excited to see where you guys are with Omnistrate right now. And thank you, Alok, for sharing the open source solution. I think that was great. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for having me. Have a good day. Bye.
This is
All right.
fantastic. Thank you.
See you again, Paul.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye.